Hello, this is Michael Carlo. I am Microsoft MVP, and I'll be talking today about the no-code custom visuals inside Charticulator. Welcome to our session, and we'll get started. Hello, just a brief introduction. My name is Mike Carlo. I own the website and help provide content for PowerBI.tips. There's a number of tools that we have at PowerBI.tips, so if you haven't heard about us, go check us out on the web. I also run a podcast with Tommy Puglia, Seth Bauer, and myself called Explicit Measures. You can find us on the major platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Anchor. I have a number of social media outlets here as well, so I'm very active on Twitter. You can catch me at Mike R. Carlo or Power BI Tips on Twitter, and then you can find me on LinkedIn, and we also have a YouTube channel. Just a lot of good training content and free things that are out there to teach people about Power BI. Today's session is all about building inside Charticulator. So we're not really going to do a whole lot of introduction or slides. We're just going to jump right in. I will say one thing briefly first as we get going here, that when you think about custom visuals, there's kind of 3 or 4 places where you can get custom visuals. You can get the standard visuals out of desktop. Those are the ones that come from the Power BI desktop build. Then you have the App Store or App Source, where you can go get a bunch of custom visuals there as well. And those are kind of pre-built from other individuals, but you're still kind of confined to input fields and a very standard type of look and feel for those visuals as well. And then you move into this custom range. So we're trying to, you have all the way at the end of the spectrum, you have like full code, D3.js, writing HTML, and really writing some code to build a custom visual. Well, then we have kind of some tools in the middle here. The tool that we're going to talk about today is Charticulator. There is no code writing. There's a little bit of code we can write inside Charticulator, but it's on the easier end of the spectrum of things to learn. Very flexible program and came out of the Microsoft research area. So with that, let's jump right in. So I'm going to move over here and I'm going to go over to Power BI Desktop. Well, as we load Power BI Desktop, you can download the Charticulator app directly from the app source, and we'll show you how to do that here in a moment. Let me open up my most recent file. This will bring us some data sets, and let's start here at the beginning of our overview. So just going to go through a general, how do you load Charticulator? What does it look like? Let me put on my Zoom it here. So you'll see over here, I've already loaded this visual. I will reload it again. It's this little blue and red icon over here on the right-hand side. I'm going to reload it again just so you can see how I got it in here. I click on the ellipsis on the far right-hand side. Clicking on the ellipsis, you can go get more visuals, the first item in this drop-down menu. Clicking get more visuals, you're taken to the app's source. So this is where all the Power BI visuals live. And in here, we can just type in Charticulator. Like this, and then Charticulator will pop up. So this is the application. There's actually a number of good documentation pieces that are on the website, and actually I'll bring you there as well, just so we can see it clearly. So here's the website, charticulator.com. And this is a project that came from the Microsoft research team. There's a lot of great documentation here. I have a number of videos on my YouTube channel to go in depth on how to build individual visuals, and even walking through all the features we're going to walk through today, just kind of describing how the program works, what are all the buttons doing, and what do they do. There's a great getting started page here to kind of read through your documentation. This is the kind of gallery that you can look at. These are visuals that have been built inside Charticulator. And Microsoft has been continually investing. There's a lot of changes on the GitHub repo for Charticulator. And for those of you who are long fans of Power BI tips, you'll know that I'm a big fan of Charticulator. And actually, for a period of time, I took a code copy of their GitHub and then actually have made a gallery of custom visuals. And you can go visit those or at gallery.powerbi.tips. These are free to download. If you go over here to the charts area at the top, this little chart area, those are where the charts are, or the custom visuals are built. These are custom visuals that you can download as PBI viz files, and they are samples or things that have been built inside the Charticulator. If you want to build your own, you can click this button here called Create My Own. and it'll take you over to my version of Charticulator, which is still on the web. It's an older version of the Charticulator. They have since done a lot of updates to the code since I actually took a code snip here quite a while ago, about maybe a year and a half or so ago. With that, let's go back over to finish loading this. So go back in here to Get It Now. I'll click the Get It Now button over here on the left-hand side to load Charticulator in. It is a free visual. Anyone can go grab it. And once it loads here, it's going to tell me, because I already loaded it, that the visual already exists. I'll just say update, and I'll get the latest bits of that visual, and the visual was successfully imported. We're good to go. So first things first, how do you get it on the page? It works just like a normal visual. You'll click it on the right-hand side in the visualizations pane. It'll then populate the visual on the page. And there's a lot of information inside the visual itself. It doesn't auto-build you anything because you haven't added any data fields to it. But there's information here. There's go to some tutorials. You can see a lot more information about how to use Charticulator. If you want to add data to this, you go to your data area or the data that you have, and you can add some data fields directly to the data column and the sales column. There is the ability of adding a linking field. And so links allow you to create things like a chord chart where you have data coming from a source and arriving at a destination. The example that we go through on YouTube, I believe, is around episode 5, maybe episode 7. Oh, here we go. Episode 8 on YouTube. We go through how to build this chord chart. And in this chord chart, you're able to build linkages where you're looking at shipment sales moving from a country or to a country. So you can see in this chart, we're looking at the United States over here, and then shipping things from China and where China ships their products to. You have Japan over here, and you can see what is shipping in and out of Japan depending on the color of the lines. So this is a visual that can be built inside Charticulator. We're going to go over the basics today, so we're not going to go too deep to that. Once you've added some data here on the actual visual, you're able to get started. To do so, you'll click the ellipsis over here that says More Options. This is how we start building the visual. Clicking the ellipsis, you'll see the very first item in the list will be called Edit, and that will get us into the editing program. So we're going to hit Edit here, and this will take us into Charticulator. So now the visual has been maximized to a full size, and now you can click a button here on the left-hand side, called Create Chart. So if you click Create Chart, you'll go into the chart building application, and this is Charticulator, and you can see the data fields now have been applied here. So I really typically don't start just by dropping in fields directly to the visual. I actually have a bit of a methodology that I follow here, but this is just how to get in and start editing it. So I'm going to click the button up here on the upper left-hand corner called Back to Report. We'll click that and go back to the main page. So let's just build something simple. Let's just get started here. So here's this is a standard visual that comes from Power BI. It's a simple bar chart. You have the different countries listed on the y-axis, and then you have an x-axis that is numerical in nature. And then we have everything colored by different bars. To build this, these are the fields you would use. You would add a dimension to the axis, that same dimension to the legend, and then you would put some sort of calculation or sum or aggregator on the values area. This will then produce this type of chart. When I like to build visuals, I like to start with a table. So I typically will build a single table of all the information that I need. So this one here says minimum of sales. Maybe I don't want that. Maybe I want some other kind of aggregation on that. So I'll change my implicit aggregation to maybe average. So now I can see different numbers by averages here. So in order to make these things match, I'll go up here to my other chart. Instead of doing minimum of sales, I'll do the average here, and we'll be able to see that these numbers are now matching based on the countries where they're coming from. All right, so this is good, a good start. Now that I have the table, I typically build this table first, and then what I'll do is I'll copy it using Control-C, click on the white space in the report page area, and Control-V to paste it. Once I have that, I have the visual that's built here right in front of me. And now what I'll do is I'll click on the Charticulator icon over here on the right-hand side, and this will let me change the visual from a table into Charticulator. Clicking on that, I'll be able to see that my fields have moved over here, but I do have to rearrange them a little bit. This typically happens. It tries to evenly divide out the measures between data and links for whatever reason. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the average of sales up to the data field. So average of sales will move up to the data area, and now we're ready to go. Now I want to open up this chart area here a little bit. I'm going to make it a bit bigger so we can build something. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a very similar chart to what's this Power BI chart here, but we maybe add a little bit of flair to it and maybe slightly change it. But we're going to essentially build a bar chart first just to go through the mechanics and walk through how do you build things in Charticulator. Another thing that's really important to note here before I jump into the edit feature is the reason I start with a table is I need to know how many records of data or what does the data kind of look like before I get into the application. You can view the data inside your custom visual, but I like to see it first. So for every single data point, and this is important to note here, for every dimension, Canada, France, Germany, Mexico, and USA, you'll note that there's a number or value associated with that. Because there's 5 items, there will be 5 data points in Charticulator. Each data point will represent one glyph, and we'll talk about glyphs in a minute, and a glyph is like a visual representation of a single dimensional data point. If I need more data points, if I need more items, if I want Canada to repeat multiple times, I would need to add another column or change how the average of sales is working. Instead of doing average of sales, I might say do not summarize. And then the data would come in with multiple rows or records that I could use inside Charticulator. All right, with that, we have 5 data points. So we're going to go in, click on the ellipsis under More Options. We're going to click the first item in the list called Edit. And now we're inside the Charticulator application. Now, there are some things I like to set up before I get going here. I'm going to click Create Chart. And I'm going to minimize the top ribbon by clicking this little tiny bar on the far right-hand side called Switch Ribbons. We're going to minimize that by clicking that. So if I click that little button, it'll then change the visual type, so it makes it very thin, and I get a little bit more landscape here. Also, I also have fields here, country and average of sales. These are already here in my fields window, or my fields well. I don't technically need the visualizations and the fields well from Power BI desktop. So I'm going to click the names of them and minimize them to give me even more space to build my chart area. When you come into the chart area, let's walk across the buttons at the top here, and then we'll talk about these panes here on the right-hand side. A link. The link feature allows you to take multiple data points or multiple glyphs. So in our example, we had 5 different data points. We can make a link between each of those 5 data points. This is how you can draw a banded chart or dots on a line, and then the line goes between those different dots. So the links allow you to connect different glyphs together. This next button is the legend. So if you need to add the legend somewhere on your chart, you can add your own legend with that button. We have these things called guides. There are a number of different guides: horizontal, vertical, a vertical group, and a horizontal group. And then this is a polar guide. So it guides around a polar axis. I typically don't use the horizontal and vertical guides. I very often use the horizontal stacked guides and the vertical stacked guides. I use these a lot. So these are features that we will use. And what you do is you basically just draw them. So if you click on the button, and then you can go anywhere on the page and drag your cursor down, and that will draw some guides. And then the guides will have some properties over here in the bottom right-hand side. See the guide coordinator, I have only 2 items. I can increase that number. And every time I increase that number, I get more guides between the 2 data points. Another thing that's interesting to note here is this guide has these little white circles on either end. A white circle means this object, whatever that may be, is unbounded. It has no connection to a reference point on the chart or the chart area. This also brings up some interesting points here. You'll look here as well. You'll see that there's these very faint lines, these dotted lines here, here, and on the edges of the chart. These are default guides, and you cannot remove them, but they help you align visual parts of the visual across the page. This one down the middle it will always be in the middle of the report or the middle of the visual. This one at the top is an edge, and you basically get a distance that you can have from the edge of the visual. So that distance is always there. If you want to adjust those guides on the page, you just click anywhere in the white space out here, and then you'll be able to see here the margins is what those are defined as. Margins is 20 pixels each. And in here, you can then adjust any of those margins. So we go to the top margin and adjust it to 40. You'll see that that line at the top of the page just moved down to 40 pixels away from the edge that's right here. All right, with that, we're done with talking about guides. We can get rid of those. Next, you'll see we have another button up here called plot segments. We have a couple different plot segments we can work with. We have a two-dimensional plot segment, meaning I can draw things in an X and Y direction. And then I have a one-dimensional plot segment. This is basically a line, and it draws things or data points on that line. We also have this thing called scaffolds. I don't typically use these very much. So we have a, again, horizontal line, vertical line, a polar line, and then you can actually draw your own scaffold. This is a custom curve scaffold in case you want to draw something that's more creative or a certain shape, but you can draw it with a pen. These other objects here are things that you can use inside the glyph, as well as inside the report page, as well as the guides. The guides can be kind of used anywhere as well, but these are the primary objects that I'm using inside this glyph area. And what we can think of a glyph is every time you have a dimension data point. We looked earlier about all those 5 different data points. If I go over here again and click on this ellipsis for the fields area, clicking on fields, I can again see my data and see how it's represented inside Charticulator. So this is how the data is being represented for every single dimension that I have here. So for Canada, for France, each one of these objects will have its own glyph, but I build one glyph at a time and it repeats those values for each object. So what we can do here now is I can add a mark into the glyph area. And what this does is it produces a bar. Now there's no data bound to these bars, but there are 5 of them. There are 5 data bars because there are 5 countries in our data set. Now we were looking to mimic our bar chart earlier, so we actually need to rotate these bars horizontally. So you'll see over here in the layers area, we can actually see what this object that we selected, we added a mark of a shape and put that in here, and that came into this glyph area. So there are a number of marks we can use. We can use this rectangle thing. We can use this ellipse, which can be a circle if it's the same width and height. And then you also have this triangle shape. Other glyphs that you have are objects, or these are just symbols that you can use. You can add a line as a glyph. So that's another line object. Then you have a text box and a text line, essentially. And then you have pictures. So these are images that you can bring in and load in directly into your report. The next thing we have here is I just cover the name here. This one is a data axis. This is very important, and I use this quite frequently, especially when I need to have multiple objects at different lengths or widths, depending on my data. This one we'll use today in our demo. Okay, next thing we have here is the glyph area. So I can pop this out using this pin. So the pin allows me to pop it in or out. Hitting the pin pops it out, and then I can resize this to get larger if I need to zoom in and zoom around on the glyph area. This is where we will add lines and circles and shapes or text. And so every object in here, if I click on one of these objects, or actually if I grab a piece of data here called average of sales, if I grab average of sales over here, this product has dimensions. So this bar has a height and a width. So this glyph will change depending on how I adjust it with this average of sales. You'll also notice here, all these other fields over here also have colors with them. So I can take the average of sales and I can add it directly to width and height, but I can also add it to the color. So the fill of the color could be determined by the average of the sales number or the stroke width. We could change the stroke to a number or something else here. So this is really the key differentiator there, I think, that's between what Charticulator is doing and what Power BI Desktop is doing. Charticulator is saying, here's a shape, and this shape has different properties. Any of those properties, whether width, height, fill, stroke, opacity, is it visible or not? All of the physical properties of that shape can be derived from pieces of data. So Power BI Desktop can send information into the visual that will allow me to change or tweak or adjust how the visual is working. So I'm going to pin this back in. I'm going to quickly go over these layers objects here. So these are layers. We have different charts. If we had multiple plot segments on this page, you would see that there would be multiple charts in the plot segment. To highlight it, I just click on it. And because we're trying to build a horizontal bar chart as opposed to a column chart, which is what we have here, we can change the stacking from the X direction and we can change it to the Y direction. And that'll change all of our bars and go horizontally. The next area we have here is the glyph. So you'll see that we have a glyph object here, and we have the thing called glyph here, but we also have a plus sign. So that means we can actually have multiple glyphs for data points. So we can keep adding them here and have multiple glyphs on a page, which is sometimes relevant for what you want to build. This glyph also has an area where you can add the shape. So you can click on the shape name and you can name stuff as you want. So you can just call this bar and that it will update the bar. You can also name the glyph and say this is object 1. And that will then allow you to update that name for that attributes there. Apparently did not take my name, but that's okay. So now what we're going to do next is, now that we've been able to kind of go through this, once you click on something here, the last area that we haven't really talked about is the attributes area. This is kind of large. There's a lot of pieces here. So for all the different attributes of each object, whether it's a plot segment or it's a line or a mark or a box or some text boxes, it'll all have properties. And these are all the different properties of those individual selected items. So I'll go here and collect the bar. I'm going to open up the glyph now. So what we're going to do is take the average of sales, and I'm actually going to add it to the width inside the glyph. So what this does is this automatically changes the width of the bars to match that data point now. And you'll see now we have the average of sales inside this width. Now, one thing you'll note here, that everything that Charticulator does is it tries to auto-aggregate everything. So in certain cases, you may have multiple records for the country of Canada. Well, in this case, it'll actually have to render all that data down to a single data point. So in here, we're going to say this is actually the average of all those data points. For our example that we're doing right now, it's very simple. We only have one data point. We have one data point coming from Power BI Desktop. Therefore, we have just one average value that's going to come in here. So even though it's saying average, it's taking an average of one number, which is just the actual number. Now, the next thing we want to do is we may want to add some labels to this. Now, instead of adding a typical axis here, I can add the country, and I can drag that all the way over here to the y-axis, and you'll see I'll have each of the countries named at the end of the list over here. Pretty helpful. That's kind of nice. But I may not want that. I may actually want, instead of having each of the countries there, I may want to put them, let's say maybe in a more creative way, let's add them to each of the bars themselves. So I'm going to leave the axis here because this allows us to sort the different data bars by a specific direction. So what I'll do now is I will go down here to the plot segment, and I'm going to go down to the y-axis, and then I'm going to say visible. There's a visibility option here. If I can find it. Style, color, width, visible. It's a little checkbox right there in the middle. So I'm going to actually turn off the visibility of it. Even though I've bound the data, the data has direct sorting. So the fact that we have it sorted is we want to do that. So that's why I'm adding the country to that axis there. But I will turn off the visibility so it's not showing that axis anymore. Now instead, I'm going to add a text box. So click on text, and I'm going to go click over here inside our little glyph area. And so you'll see that the text box has been added, and it's kind of off the bar. So let's adjust that and fix it. So I'm going to unpin this. I'm going to zoom it out here, and then I'm going to zoom in, and then I'm going to use my cursor here, and I'm going to move the dot. Actually, I'm going to move the whole bar. Can I move that over here? And then I'm going to move the little dot as well. So this is the anchor point. So the anchor is right there. Oops. Let's try and get all that right. Move the anchor point right to the front of the bar. And there's an offset happening here. So the text is automatically being offset by this data point. So I'm going to just move it kind of close to it. And I don't like the black text on the blue bar. So what we're going to do is we're going to adjust the color of the text. We're going to change that directly to white. So now it pops a little bit better. And I may want it a little bit larger. So let's go up to 16. And now we need to add some data to this. So what data should the text show? We'll grab the country column and drop that on the text area. Now we have the labeled number, or the labeled country of what that bar is representing, Canada, France, Germany. So now this is something you can't do in desktop. We can't get this desktop highly customized ability here to drop other text fields like this. So on the other end of the bar, we may want to add the average of sales. So again, I'm going to grab the text box, drop it in here again to my chart. I'm going to pop it back out so I can see what I'm doing. Now I'm going to take the anchor point and put it on the upper end. And you'll see here when I'm doing this, another interesting point here that's worthy to note. You'll note that those lines, those guide coordinator lines, are turning orange. And that's very important because when they turn that color of orange, you're able to see that you're anchoring something. And then you'll also note here when I zoom in, the anchor point itself is actually green. And that's really important. Because if that's not green, you don't have an anchor point. It'll just float and you'll get really weird results in your visuals. So I'm going to just center this text here a little bit more. Now, it was very smart here. It knew that the anchor point is on the right and the text is on the left. And so it already changed my anchor direction. So that means the anchor is on the right-hand side. And so now the text will go towards the left. Next thing we're going to do is we're now going to take average of sales. We will now add that to our text box, and there's our average of sales. And if we go in here, we'll also see that there are additional format options at the end of the line. So we have a 01F. So in here, we can actually go to the end of that line. If I change it to a 0F, so that means 0 float. And I think if I put a comma in front of it, it now adds commas, decimals, and it floats it to 0 decimal places. So now I've got a nice comma separated number in here. And then the last part here, I'll go back to the color, and then I'll change this to white again. And if this is in, what is this, average of sales? So this is a sales item. We can also add this so it can be a $sign. So I'll go up here to the front of the formatting and add a $sign somewhere in here. There we go. And now we'll add a $sign in front of that as well. So pin this back in, and there we go. There's our chart. The only thing we're missing now is the coloring schema. So we have no colors attached here. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to go back to the bar. I'm going to minimize these other layers so you can see all the attributes. And the fill is just on this this blue color. So I'm going to grab the country and I'm going to drag it to the fill. And there we go. Now all the bars are colored by their appropriate colors. I'm going to go back to the glyph area. I'm sorry, layers area. I'm going to click on the plot segment. And now we will change the, I went to chart area, sorry. I want to change the top of the chart to go back to 20. I want it to be kind of maximized for this window space. We're done. The next most important thing is to hit the save button all the way up in the upper left-hand corner. Hit save. And that will then save this style of this chart. And we can go back to the report. And there we go. So now we have another bar chart representing the same information, but now we're doing it with a little bit different flair. We've added some numbers at the end now, and we've been able to add lettering or words on the left-hand side. It kind of makes it a little bit more fun to look at than the standard bar chart. All right. With that, we'll go on to one more visual. We'll build a barbell chart. So this is where you have two nodes on either end and you have a line between them. So again, we'll start off with our visual. We have our categories, pants, hats, shirts, and shoes. And you'll see here now I've added two columns. What is the minimum of sales and what is the maximum of sales? If I go over to how this visual was built by opening up the visualization pane, you can see I have a category and I have an implicit measure of minimum sales. So it's minimum listed here. And I also have another one for max of sales. It's still same sales column, but now I'm using an implied measure of maximum. So I've already designed the data the way I want. Now I just need to build the chart. I'm going to grab the chart, hit Control C, Control V to copy the chart over. We're going to open this up, and then we'll click on the Charticulator visual again. And I will move all the data fields back up to the data area. And I'm going to make this chart visual a little bit larger so we can see it when we're all done, like that. Next, we will click on the ellipsis at the upper right-hand corner, hit Edit, click Create Chart. And now that I'm done with everything on the visualizations for fields and visualizations pane or settings, I'm going to minimize those two areas and go back and maximize the Charticulator area. This time we're going to build something a little bit different. So we still need the categories on our y-axis. We still need to stack things on the y direction because we're going to stack things across the page. So those are the two setups we're going to do here. But now we're going to pop out the glyph. And now we're going to do some interesting things on the glyph. So the glyph, we now need to have multiple data points to represent multiple objects on the glyph now. So we're going to start instead, we're going to start with this thing called the data axis. We click on data axis, and wherever you start your cursor is the 0 mark, and wherever you end your cursor is the high number mark, right? So this is going to be 0 to 10, something like that. So now I have my axis here, and there's no data bound to it. It's just basically a line right now. And so I might want not to put it in the center here. Let's just move it down here. I'm going to grab the corner here and grab the other corner and move them down. And now what I'll do is I want to add the minimum of sales. So I'll grab here and put the minimum of sales on the chart. And you'll see it says average minimum of sales. It's a little bit confusing, but the averaging is just trying to do the aggregation for you. But minimum of sales is really the value that we're working on. So minimum of sales is the actual data point that we have. Next, I will add the maximum of sales also to this data point as well. And you'll see now I have 2 data points on the same axis. Now, this is a data axis that has a very narrow range. So if I pin this back in, I should be able to select something that's a little bit different. If I can select one here that's a different one. I need to put data points on the glyph first. So I'll just do this by zooming in really far, and I think we'll be able to get it working too. The reason it goes all the way up to 1,100 is because this data axis is trying to operate on all the data points. If I click the ellipsis up here, you'll see that our largest data point is 1,010 and our lowest data point is 30. So this is important because the data axis is going to allow us to be able to scale everything in the same size for all the glyphs. Next we're going to do is we're going to zoom in really far on this one end here so I can actually align some things here. Next, I'll grab a shape, and then I'm going to go here and I'm going to drop just a shape circle on the average of the min, so the lowest end. And then I'm going to do that again. I'm going to go up to the upper end. I'm going to grab another circle. Now this one's not very clear to see, but I'm also going to grab a line here. I'm going to draw a line between them like that. So just 2 dots and a little line. So if I pin this back in, you'll see there's other data points on here. And you see my data axis is kind of stuck up here in the top. I don't really like that. So we can click on the data axis, minimize the glyph area, and we can specify what's the position. So I think we can make this to the last object, and it'll put it at the very last object. So we have hats, pants, shirts, and shoes. The very last object in my data set is shoes, therefore the data axis is there. But it's on the wrong side. It's flipped upside down. So I want to change the position from default to opposite. And if I do that, click on opposite, it will then flip the data axis over. And I'm hanging off the edge here a little bit, so I'm going to grab the bottom edge here and move it up a bit. And then this left margin, move that over a bit. And now we've got our barbell chart. Now, I don't really like this. It's not quite how I want it to look yet. So let's do a little bit more flavoring here with this. So with this, let's go to our symbols here. And so let's add some color. So our symbols should match our categories. So I'll grab the symbol 1, add it to our category. And then I'll grab symbol 2 and also add it to our category. So now the data points will match. So each bar that we're making will have different data colors per each object. And so maybe I don't want the circles to be so small. We also have properties there as well. We can change these and turn them up in size. So let's just maybe 75. How big does that look? Not big enough. Let's go 150. That's looking a little better. So we'll do 150 there on that one, and we'll do 150 on the other end. Looks a little bit better. And you'll notice here the line is actually drawn on top of the circles. So you can see right here very closely that, actually that one's probably not a good one to look at. Let's look at this one. Zoom in there. That line is on top of the circle. So if we don't want that, we can actually rearrange the objects here and they will put the line underneath. So this glyph area draws things in from the bottom towards the top. So the very lowest item in that list is on the top as the thing that is drawn last. So if I want the line to be drawn first, I would then move the line up 2 spaces, and now it goes underneath the circles. And then we can even adjust the circles even further and say, well, maybe I don't want them to be a full solid color. Maybe we want them to have a stroke or an outside edge. So now what we'll do is I'll grab the category and I'll add it to a stroke, outside edge, and then I'll give you the color of that. So it'll make it a little bit larger, but the fill for the inside, maybe we want this to be a little bit lighter. So I'm going to adjust those colors to be lighter on the inside. I don't want to do that. I want to just do this. I think I adjusted my color for all of it. There we go. So I can do the fill on the inside. Maybe I want the fill to be like a gray or some kind of a grayish, middle center, and then a color on the rim or the outside edge or the border of the outside of the circle. So I'll do that for both. I'll erase the colors for that. I'll grab the color for the stroke. And then on the fill, I'll just adjust it just to be like this gray thing. So now I have a little gray element here. And then I think we're good. We can also lighten up the line a little bit. So the line looks a little bit too heavy in between the 2 different data bars. So we can take that line and make it a little bit lighter. So it kind of makes it fade a little bit or match a bit more of the style of everything else. Or if you want. Actually, you know what? I like the line to be a little bit fatter. So let's just go up a little bit in numbers here. Let's make it 3. Add a little bit more depth to it. And I don't think I like the line being gray now. I think actually looking at it as I think I'm testing this out, I probably want this to match the category of the colors. So I'll add the categories there, and now I've got a nice little colored line between each of the data points. So now I have a colored circle, and then a little line that goes between them. I'm going to quickly tweak this a little bit more with the line width. I'll make that 2. And then on the other one, I'll make it 2 as well. So now we got a nice, cool looking barbell chart. So it now matches the one circle matches the minimum point, the other circle matches the maximum point, and now we have a line that spans between them. All right, we're going to move on to our next demo. So I'll hit save here. I'm going to go back to the report page, and there we go. There's our bar chart. Now, one thing you'll note here, if I resize this, the visual doesn't quite resize. The aspect ratio is not changing. You see how that I have the gray area there? So if you need to adjust your visual, typically what I'll do from a technique standpoint is I'll get the visual where I want. I'll get the dimensions of the visual by going here to the visualizations panel, clicking on the paint roller and saying, okay, here's the general properties. All right, the width is, let's just make it even numbers, 680. The height is 300. Something easy I can remember. So 680 by 300. I don't need a legend on this. I'll turn the title off. And so now what I'll do is I'll go back into edit this, click the ellipsis, click edit. I'll go down here, instead of the width being 600, I'll do 680. The height will be 300. And so now I've already changed the aspect ratio to match the actual visual. I'll hit save again. It'll then save the visual. I'll click back to the report, and now it maximizes the depth of that window so it fully matches. And then I can move this higher in the page, and there you go. Custom visual done. All right, let's move on to the box and whisker plot. So this one, we're going to use a lot of data points, and you'll see here on my data point here on the left-hand side, we have a numerical value. This is like an index, right? This is just which animal we're talking about. And then I have a type, what type of bug it is, what type of animal it is. This is a Pokemon data set that was provided by Daniel Marsh Patrick, who actually, this is kind of where this design came from. So I got to give credit where credit is due. And then there's hit points. So each Pokemon group has a number of hit points, from low number of hit points to high number of hit points. So again, I'll copy the chart, Control C, Control V. Put the chart here. I'll make the chart large. And then I'll click on the Charticulator icon. It's going to again rearrange all my columns, so I'll move them back all to be under the data area. And then I'll click on the ellipsis and click edit. So now we're going to quickly build a box and whisker plot. So very much similar to the same pattern we did before. I'll click on the area. I'm going to click on the Y, the stacking, when we're going to stack it on the Y. Now we're going to stack this chart on the type 1. Now you'll note that there's a lot of grouping here, which is great. I'm just going to show you what's happening here. So if we look at the data set, we have a lot of different representations for the bug. So if I just drag a mark and put it in the glyph area, you'll see there's many, many different bars here. And I'm going to zoom in on this chart. And you can see for a fact, there is every single bug has a single bar that's ordered by what they're doing. So if I grab the hit points and add that to the width of the bar, you'll see that we now have these like spikes. That's because each of these bars are representing the length of each of the hit points for each of the animals. So we don't really want that. We actually want all those data points to be grouped together. So if you click on the chart area, plot segment area, and you grab the group by object and you say group by type 1. And what this does, even though we have many, many data points for the bug and the dark Pokemon types, we now have a grouping of multiple data points that just average out to something. So now this is going to say now this is actually working correctly. When we look at the bar here, the average hit points is actually the average hit points. We have the average of all those data points that are coming in here, which is wonderful because now we can do some other mathematical and statistical things on this as well. And that's what we're going to do next. So instead of doing that average for this bar, I'm actually going to delete the bar. So we want to do something different. I'm going to delete that. And I'm going to pop out the glyph again. We'll zoom this really big so we can see it. Again, I'll make the data axis and I'll add that. So go from 0 to a high number. That's what we'll add there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add to this, we're going to add the hit points multiple times. because we're going to plot different math functions of what hit points are doing. So we're going to go grab hit points. We're going to add it to the data axis once. And then the first thing it comes up with is average. If you read the documentation on Charticulator, you can actually change this expression from not to be average. You can actually change it to be something else. So I'm going to actually change average to be min, M-I-N, all lowercase. And that'll change the position of that hit points to be on that minimum data point axis. Again, I'll grab hit points again, add it to the data axis. Now we're going to use another function called quartile. This is doing statistics now on top of the data we have. So I can type in the word quantile. And then the function or column we're going to be doing it on top of is hit points. And then I can just specify which quantile or quartile I'm trying to look at. 1, the very first quartile. And I don't know why it moved it all the way up there. Let's just do Q1 HP, I think. Quantile, comma 1. I don't know why it moved it all the way off the data axis. I'm going to delete that one real quick, and we'll put it back on here. See if I can do that again. Quantile, hit points, group, first quantile. That doesn't seem right. Let me get rid of my data axis here. Something's a little bit weird. Let me add in one more in here again. Yeah, I don't like that. Something's wrong with my data axis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this glyph. Go back in here. We're going to delete the data axis. I'm going to add a new one again. So I'll pop the glyph back out again. We're going to start over again. I must have typed in something funny there that was doing some weird stuff. So I'm going to go grab my data axis again, zoom out, do from 0 to a number. I'm going to grab the hit points and add it there. And I'm going to actually add it in there multiple times. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right, so let's start off with the easy stuff. We're going to start with minimum, min, good. We're going to do the maximum, the highest end, max, good. Average, good. We'll leave that one alone. Quantile. Not happy that the thing's throwing itself all the way off the edge of the page. Let's try this one and see if I do a quantile 3. Yeah, it moves them all the way off the page. That's not cool. Somehow they're disassociating themselves with the axis. It must be a bug that's been introduced into the application. Let's see if I can use another aggregator here. I will instead, what I'll do is I'll just add the hits point here. And what I'll do is I'll use the average. And then I'm going to just add a specified amount. It's just, if the quantile function was working, we'd be able to use that one. So instead, I'm going to just do average plus 10. And then I'll do an average minus 10. Not ideal, but we're going to get the point here. It'll allow us to build our chart. Average minus 10. So we can do math functions in here as well. So now I have at least 5 data points that I can start building my box plot around, even though the average function is not working correctly here. There should be a quantile function that should be running here that would allow us to be able to do this. For whatever reason, whenever I change it, it's throwing the data points off the line. So we don't want that. But this will work for now in a pinch. Now we can build the rest of the chart. So let's flip the position here to the opposite. Let's zoom in again. And now we're going to start building our bar chart. So this time we're going to use some guides because we want the bars and the lines that are associating with the bar, the box and whisker plot to not extend all the way. So I'm going to click the guide in the Y direction, and I'm going to make a guide here on the very far left-hand side of my axis. And I'm going to update this to be, 3 sounds good. That looks all right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start drawing some of my whiskers. So I'm going to zoom in here really close to the minimum HP. We're going to draw one whisker here while I draw the little line. So I'm going to start here at the top, and I'm going to draw down. And again, I'm making sure that I draw the line right on the minimum HP data point. I'm going to go up here to the maximum one. Same thing. I'm going to draw another line right there like that. So that's the upper whisker of the box plot. Then I'm going to click the line a third time and go from the bottom all the way up to the top. Next, I'll go build a mark. And then the mark will start at the average. So I'm going to make sure I get the average here. So I'm going to go start from the average. And I go there, and I'm going to just draw the box until I meet the upper average, or the the upper quantile. So now I have the box plot here. I'm going to add a stroke to this. Let's add a little colored stroke there. I like this lighter gray. We're going to change the line to a lighter gray as well. And then we may want to highlight the upper and lower ends. So the lower end, maybe like we'll just go with like a red color. And the upper end, maybe we'll make that like a green color on the other side. So now we have a box plot that's plotted here. And I don't like the thickness of the line, so we're going to update that as well. So line width of 3, make it a little bit fatter so it's not so wispy, like that. I'm going to make the bar that goes between them a little bit fatter as well. Make it like a 4. There we go. And oh, we'll see we have a problem here. I have drawn my lines such that they are on top of each other, so they're actually overriding itself. So I'm going to go back over to the layers here. I'm going to click on line 3, which I believe is the line that goes across them. I'm going to move line 3 up 2, and I might dash it. I don't know. We can do other things here. You can do all kinds of fun little dotted or whatever you want to add some flair to your chart. And with that, we should be done. So I can minimize this, pin this back in, and then there's all my box plots across all of them. Now, my box plots are not doing a very good job here because my quantiles did not work, but you get the idea. It's doing the box and whisker plot. Next thing we will do is we'll go back in here to the data axis. And then under the attributes for the data axis, we're going to actually add this on the very last object. So move it to the last object in our list, move up the bottom bar here a little bit like that, and there we go. If you want to add data labels to things, you can also do that as well. We could add data labels if we don't want the data labels on the left-hand side. Again, just as easy as adding a text box, zooming in to something that's on the data points, dropping that in. There's our text box. And then we're going to add the type to each of the text boxes. And now we don't even need the data axis. So we can go back to our layers area, go to the plot segment, and now we can turn off the visibility of the data axis, and we can stretch this chart out a bit more. And because normal is falling off the end there just a little bit, I'm going to pull it back a hair, and there we go. So there we have all the different types listed at the end, and then all of our different ranges. So you can kind of see which ones have a tighter range. This one has a couple outliers in the normal range of very high hit points, but most of them are back here in the middle area. With that, we can hit save and hit back to report. And that's kind of like the 101 of Charticulator. We were able to build some charts. We showed you how to load it and build some fancy charts that you just don't get out of the box from Power BI Desktop. Highly recommend using this chart type. I think this really fills the gap for a lot of heavy chart building. Get in, get started. The learning curve is a little bit steep with Charticulator, so it takes a little bit of time. Watch our YouTubes on video. If you want to go find them, you can go find me on YouTube. It's youtube.com/PowerBI-tips. That's our channel. And then down at the bottom here, you can catch all of the playlists. And then we have a whole season 1 of Charticulator where we have a full wide range of content all around all these different 8 or 9 videos of just around Charticulator stuff. So if you like this, if you want more content, there's about, I don't know, probably about another 3 hours of content here in case you want to watch it as well. All right, and with that, we are done. So let me go back over to our slides here. Thank you all very much, and a super special thank you to Microsoft for supporting this. This is a great event, and I hope you all are learning a lot and having a lot of fun here. Thank you very much. Here are your 3 ways to win prizes at this event. And with that, thank you all very much, and we'll see you around on the internet.